So that being, Sri Krishna, God the Father, if we want to use an Abrahamic term, is now on the battlefield and about to instruct. In the middle of the epic, 50,000 verses, about to speak to Arjuna. Okay, so Arjuna is, so the first chapter is just the warriors, listing the warriors. The commentators say the Gita doesn't really start. The Gita is a Vedanta text, because Gita, as you know from the Vedanta course, the section, becomes associated with Vedanta. The Gita, there's 3 texts of Vedanta, the Vedanta Sutra, Upanishads, and the Bhagavad-Gita. So Gita was sung by Bhagavan. Why is it sung? Because it's recited. It has the Vedic metras applied to it. Dharma-kshetre, kuru-kshetre, three notes. This is the most verses, the shlokas are 8-syllable, anushtub. Dharma-kshetre, kuru-kshetre, 8 syllables. Samaveta yuyutsavaha mamekam paṇḍavaścaiva kim kurvati sanjaya. That's the first shloka verse of the Gita. And the Mahabharata is 100,000 of those. It's really 400,000 lines. Although the meter changes here and there. Okay, so there we are in the middle. The commentators say the actual Gita as a Vedanta text doesn't begin till 211. And you'll see why. So, but we'll start in 2, let's say, 4. And it so happens that the Arjuna's grandfather, beloved Bhishma, he's technically the granduncle biologically. But, the Pandus grew up, their father died, they were orphans. They died when they were little. So Bhishma was really their father figure. They grew up, that was the male sort of father figure in the household. He's on the other side, not because he loves the Pandavas, not because, for their old warrior protocol I told you about. He felt obliged to the Kurus just out of a sense of dharma because he'd lived in their palace while the Pandavas were exiled in the forest. So he felt an obligation to the Kurus. Just purely a superficial dharma consideration. And that's how it was. You fought, not just in India, by the way, other Indo-European traditions, you see that same mentality, the same attitude, the warrior mindset, the warrior protocol. One is you fight. And if someone asks you to fight, then you agree. So he's on the other side. And Drona, the guru, for similar kind of quirks of dharma, on this side, he's the guru. He's talked about both sides, everything they know about weaponry, about battle formation and statesmanship. Drona, he's a Kshatriya Brahmin, mixture of a Kshatriya and a Brahmin, and both of them, by the way, are invincible. Neither of them can be killed unless they choose to be. No one can kill them. And them on the other side. And of course, Arjuna loves Bhishma and he loves Drona. You're supposed to worship your guru and your grandfather. So we start with 4. And Arjuna says, how shall I fight Bhishma and Drona with arrows in battle? They are worthy of my worship, right? Puja how? I should be doing puja. Some of you know what puja means. You go to the temple, you do puja, with lights and incense, you worship the deity. Well, he's saying I should be doing puja to these 2 men. So that's how he decides he's not going to fight. So we'll jump to 7. We're going to have to jump to keep flicking the pages. We only have 3 or 4 sessions together. Verse 7, my very being is overpowered by weakness. I'm bewildered about my duty. Very important, because what triggers the Gita is not sort of an existential type of quest. Arjuna is not asking the big existential questions like, is there a God? Is there not a God? Is there an Atman? Is there not an Atman? Is there life after death? Is there no life after death? These are the big existential questions that the humans have engaged since the beginning of recorded history. He's not asking anything like that. Am I eternal? Why am I here? He's confused about his dharma. Dharma-sammūḍha-cetāḥ. And it's very important because this is going to be a text about dharma, primarily. It's going to bring in Vedanta and yoga and Sankhya and all of these things we've been studying all semester. But it's going to be bringing them all into, they're all going to be subservient or secondary or auxiliary or in some way supportive of the notion of action, whether that's karma yoga, which we'll define in a minute, or bhakti yoga. Karma yoga is action in the world yoga. Not like Patanjali, forest yoga. action in the world yoga, which the highest expression of which in the Gita is bhakti, when we act in the world but offer everything as an offering to God, offer everything in service of God. Okay, so 7. So I am bewildered about my dharma-sammūḍha-cetāḥ. What is best for me? I am your student. Śiṣyas śādhi tvaṁ prapannam. Now, Arjuna, he can't figure it out himself. He doesn't know what is his duty, the conflict of duty, right? On the one hand, he's supposed to worship and honor the grandfather and Bhishma and Drona. Keep your eye on those two names. The grandfather Bhishma and Guru Drona, Guruji. They're on the other side. You're supposed to worship them. So one set of dharmas is calling him to worship them. Dharma of a grandson to a grandfather. Dharma of a disciple to a guru. But on the other hand, he has to kill them because they're on the other side. And he has to protect his army. And if he doesn't, the Bhishma and Drona are going to devastate his army. He has a duty to his boys on his army. He's supposed to try to get them home alive, right? That's the dharma of a commanding officer, surely, in any army. So, it's that dharma. And the only way he's going to protect his army is if he takes out Bhishma and Drona. So this is the conflict. So he's saying, how am I going to exchange, arrows with them? I'm supposed to be offering them puja. So 7, my very being is overpowered by weakness. I wouldn't translate that as weakness. Kārpaṇya, I would say pity. Not even that. You don't pity Bhishma and Drona. They're far too powerful to pity. But kārpaṇya, affection, we could even say, kripa, affection towards them. I am bewildered about my duty. Okay, now he's ready to become a disciple. Up to then he's been socially an equal with Krishna, although Krishna's God, but he's playing the role of a mortal. So in that role, he's Arjuna's cousin. So he's bewildered. So what is best for me? I am your student. He's now doesn't want to have Krishna as his equal cousin anymore. He wants him to be his guru. He wants him just to tell me what to do. Śādhi mam, instruct me. Tvaṁ prapannam, I'm surrendered to you. Now he's ready to hear. So when and this is a metaphor for the spiritual seeker as well. The commentators are going to stress this, that when we can't figure it out on our own, what is life? What happens at death? Who am I really? When we really can't understand that the human mind cannot figure these questions out on it by itself, then we become ready to seek instruction from a guru in the form of a text, right? Then we engage svadhyaya. Remember svadhyaya, Kriya Yoga and Patanjali, the second thing in the chapter 2. Study. Okay. So then Krishna, the Gita begins in chapter in verse 11, chapter 2. So now Arjuna is ready to speak. Krishna says, verse 11, my dear Arjuna, you speak words of learning, right? You're talking about you talk about dharma and this and that, yet you're mourning for what is not worthy of grief. The truly learned lament neither for the living nor the dead. First Vedanta or yoga teaching of the text. A learned person understands that the soul never dies. It's just the body that dies. So if you really understood that, or what to speak of if you perceived the Atman, why would you lament death? You would know nothing's dying. The Atman is just finished up some karma and going on to its next destination. So the first teachings of the Gita, Jnana Yoga. All yoga is built on jnana, knowledge of the self. Even Patanjali is built on jnana, because if you're going to do Chittavriti Nirodha, stilling the mind, verse 2, in order for verse 3, drashtahu sarupe vastanam, to experience the seer in its own nature, well, that means you have knowledge that there is a seer. You wouldn't be doing that unless you already knew, ahead of taking up the practice, you have to have knowledge that there's a seer to be attained. So that's Jnana Yoga. So all yoga, karma yoga, bhakti yoga, tantra yoga, any kind of yoga that you encounter is going to be based on jnana, that there is an Atman. Then, how do you realize the Atman? Then the different traditions have different paths and different methods to experience the Atman. As we'll see in the Gita, Krishna's going to say there were the two kinds of yoga. There was the inaction, the Sankhya, what he's going to call Sankhya, which is we've studied as Patanjali. Patanjali is one expression of that, which is inaction yoga. There was two, Krishna says, there's that, inaction yoga. He said there's another one that got lost. That's action yoga, which he actually just calls yoga. So be careful. When the Gita uses the word yoga, it does not mean Patanjali's Chitta Vritti Nirodha yoga. That's Patanjali's definition. Krishna's going to call that Sankhya or Jnana. But what he calls yoga is actually, he also calls karma yoga, and it's also known as buddhi yoga. There's 3 different names for it, but don't worry about too much about buddhi yoga. But anyway, karma yoga, what he calls yoga is karma yoga, action, karma, to act. Okay? All right. But he's going to, well, we'll see how it's different from karma, which simply produces reactions and reincarnation. No, it's karma yoga. We'll get to that. So, first teachings, that the wise don't mourn the living of the dead. 12. Never was there a time when I did not exist, meaning the Atman. Nor you, nor these kings, nor in the future will you or any of these kings cease to exist. The soul is eternal.